Sarah lived paycheck to paycheck, working overtime at a small diner to support her young daughter and sick mother. On a cold, rainy morning, while rushing to catch her bus to work, she noticed an elderly man standing at the bus stop, soaked to the bone and shivering. Despite having only one umbrella, and knowing she would arrive at work wet, Sarah walked over and gave her umbrella to the stranger. She watched as tears formed in his eyes when he thanked her. That evening, Sarah lost her second job due to budget cuts, leaving her wondering how she would pay next month's rent. A week later, a mysterious package arrived at her door, containing something that would transform her simple act of kindness into a moment that changed her life forever. Hi everyone, welcome to Mystic Tales. Today I'm excited to share a new story with you. Sarah woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of rain hitting her apartment window. Her small bedroom felt cold. The heating had been acting up again, but she couldn't afford repairs this month. She quietly walked to the kitchen, careful not to wake her sleeping daughter Amy in the next room. The kitchen light flickered as Sarah checked her bank account on her phone. The balance showed $80. Rent was due in 2 weeks. She had already picked up extra shifts at the diner, but it still wasn't enough, since her evening job at the grocery store had cut her hours. Her mother's medical bills sat unopened on the counter. Sarah pushed them aside, making Amy's lunch for school. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and the last granola bar from the cabinet. She needed to go grocery shopping, but that would have to wait until her next paycheck. The morning news played quietly on her old TV. The weatherman predicted rain all week. Sarah looked at her only umbrella by the door, the blue one Amy had picked out last year. The handle was slightly broken, but it still worked fine. Sarah packed Amy's lunch in her worn backpack and got ready for work. Her diner uniform was clean, but getting threadbare at the edges. She had been meaning to buy a new one, but other expenses always came first. The sound of coughing came from her mother's room. Rose had moved in with them 6 months ago, after her health declined. The medical bills were overwhelming, but Sarah couldn't bear to see her mother struggle alone. She checked on Rose, adjusting her blanket and giving her morning medicine. Amy woke up right on schedule. Sarah helped her get ready for school, braiding her hair the way she liked it. The neighbor, Linda, would take Amy to school today. Sarah couldn't afford the school bus fee this semester, but Linda's daughter was in the same class as Amy. The arrangement worked out well. The rain grew heavier as Sarah prepared to leave. She had to catch the 6:45 a.m. bus to make it to her shift on time. The diner was strict about punctuality. 3 late arrivals meant a warning, and she couldn't risk that. Not now, when she needed this job more than ever. Sarah hugged Amy goodbye and checked on Rose one last time. She grabbed her umbrella, pulled on her thin jacket, and stepped out into the rain. The morning air was crisp and cold. Water pooled on the cracked sidewalk as she walked to the bus stop, holding her umbrella tight against the wind. Her phone buzzed. A text from her evening job at the grocery store. Her supervisor wanted to talk before her shift today. Sarah's stomach tightened. She had seen this before. More hour cuts, or worse. But she pushed the worry aside. Right now, she needed to focus on getting to the diner on time. Sarah walked through the rain toward her usual bus stop. The street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by, their headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. She checked her watch. 20 minutes until her bus arrived. The rain grew stronger. Sarah pulled her thin jacket closer, grateful for her umbrella. As she approached the bus stop, she noticed an elderly man standing there. He wore a brown coat and held a wooden cane, but had no umbrella. The rain had soaked through his clothes. His shoulders trembled from the cold. Sarah stood at the bus stop, watching as water dripped from the man's gray hair. He tried to wipe his glasses with a wet handkerchief. His hands shook from the cold. She thought of her own father, who had passed away 3 years ago. He had been about this man's age. The old man turned and gave her a polite nod. Sarah noticed his eyes were tired, his face kind. He reminded her of the regulars at the diner who came in for morning coffee. He tried to stand straight, but she could see him struggling to balance with his cane on the slippery sidewalk. Sarah looked at her umbrella, then at her watch. The bus would take 15 minutes to reach the diner. She would be cutting it close, and walking in wet clothes during her shift would be uncomfortable. But she couldn't leave him standing in the rain. "Sir," Sarah said softly, "please, take my umbrella. You need it more than I do." She held out the blue umbrella, handle first. The old man looked surprised, then confused. "Oh no, I couldn't," he said. His voice was gentle, but shaky from the cold. "You'll get wet. The rain is too heavy." Sarah stepped closer, still holding out the umbrella. "Please, I insist. My workplace is not far from the bus stop." This wasn't exactly true, but she couldn't bear to see him shivering. The old man's eyes grew wet, and not from the rain. "Thank you," he said quietly, accepting the umbrella. "Such kindness from a stranger. What is your name?" "Sarah," she replied, already feeling the rain seeping through her jacket. "I'm George," he said, holding the umbrella over himself. The shivering in his shoulders slowly eased. "How will I return it to you?" Sarah shook her head. "Keep it. It's yours now." She thought of Amy, who had picked out the umbrella. Her daughter would understand. She had taught Amy that helping others mattered more than things. The bus appeared at the corner. Sarah stood in the rain, water running down her face. But seeing George standing dry under the umbrella made the discomfort worth it. As they boarded the bus, she noticed a man in an expensive suit watching them from his car parked nearby. He seemed to be talking on his phone, but Sarah was too preoccupied with thoughts of her upcoming shift to pay much attention. Sarah arrived at the diner soaking wet. Her manager Mary shook her head but said nothing as Sarah tied her apron. The morning rush kept her busy, serving coffee and breakfast to regulars who left decent tips. Her wet clothes slowly dried as she moved between tables. During her break, Sarah checked her phone. 3 missed calls from the grocery store. Her stomach tightened as she called back. The manager was direct. Due to budget cuts, they were reducing staff. Sarah's evening position had been eliminated. They could offer 2 shifts per week, but Sarah knew that wouldn't be enough. Sarah sat in the break room, staring at the wall. The loss of her second job meant falling behind on rent. Her mother's medication alone cost $200 each month. She thought about the umbrella she had given away. It seemed like such a small thing now. The diner's cook, Tom, noticed her distress. He offered to share his lunch, but Sarah politely declined. She had known Tom for 3 years. He was always kind, sneaking extra food to employees who struggled between paychecks. "You should talk to Pete at the cafe down the street," Tom said. "They need someone for evening shifts. Pay's not great, but it's something." Sarah wrote down the address. Any job was better than no job. The rain continued all afternoon. Sarah served her tables with her usual care, though her mind raced with calculations. Rent, utilities, groceries, medicine. The numbers wouldn't add up without her second job. She thought about asking Linda for extra babysitting hours, but knew her neighbor had her own struggles. A customer complained about cold coffee. Sarah apologized and brought a fresh cup. Her feet ached, and her damp socks made each step uncomfortable. But she kept smiling, kept moving. 1 table's tip would cover Amy's lunch money for tomorrow. During the afternoon lull, Sarah called the cafe. They had already filled the position. She tried not to let disappointment show as she refilled salt shakers and wiped down menus. A regular customer, an older woman named Betty, noticed Sarah's red eyes. "Everything okay, dear?" Betty asked. Sarah nodded, managing a small smile. Betty left her usual $5 tip, plus an extra $1. Small kindnesses that meant everything on days like this. By closing time, Sarah had made $42 in tips. Not bad, but not enough. She thought about the elderly man George, hoping the umbrella had kept him dry through the day. Despite everything, she didn't regret giving it to him. Her father had taught her that kindness mattered most when it was hardest to give. The rain had finally stopped as Sarah waited for her bus home. She watched other restaurants closing for the night, wondering which ones might be hiring. Tomorrow she would make more calls, fill out more applications. For now, she had to figure out how to tell Amy they needed to be extra careful with money this month. A week passed. Sarah picked up 3 extra breakfast shifts at the diner, but it still wasn't enough to make up for her lost evening job. She had started walking to work to save bus fare, carrying an old newspaper over her head when it rained. That morning, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, sorting bills into piles. Must pay now, can wait another week. She had already called the electric company to arrange a payment plan. The woman on the phone had been understanding, but rules were rules. They needed at least half the payment by Friday. What is going on? Amy sat doing homework, using the same pencil she had been carefully sharpening for days. Sarah watched her daughter erase something gently, trying to make the eraser last. They hadn't bought new school supplies this month. Rose called from her room. Her cough had gotten worse, and the doctor wanted to run more tests. Tests they couldn't afford. Sarah brought her mother water and the last of the cough medicine. They would need to refill the prescription soon. The doorbell rang. Sarah wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw a delivery person holding a package. She opened the door cautiously. "Delivery for Sarah," the man said, holding out a clipboard. Sarah signed, confused. She hadn't ordered anything. The package was medium-sized and wrapped in brown paper. No return address, just her name and address printed neatly. She placed it on the kitchen table, studying it. "Shit. What is it, Mom?" Amy asked, looking up from her homework. Sarah carefully opened the package. Inside was a letter and a sealed envelope. She opened the letter first, her hands slightly shaking. The paper was thick, expensive, the handwriting neat and clear. "Dear Sarah," she read silently. "Last week, I witnessed your kindness to an elderly gentleman at the bus stop. You gave him your umbrella, despite clearly needing it yourself. What you didn't know was that the man you helped, George, is my father." Sarah sat down, her legs feeling weak. The letter continued. "Dad has dementia. That morning, he had wandered away from his nurse. We were looking for him everywhere. I was driving around in a panic when I saw him at the bus stop, soaked through. Before I could park my car, I watched you give him your umbrella. Your simple act of kindness moved me deeply." Sarah glanced at the sealed envelope, then continued reading. "Dad talked about your kindness all week. It was one of the few things he remembered clearly. You treated him with dignity when he was confused and lost. As someone who has been blessed with success in business, I believe strongly in recognizing and rewarding genuine kindness." Good news. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a check. Her eyes widened at the amount. $25,000. A small note was attached. A small token of appreciation, no strings attached. She reread the letter. The man explained he was Michael, a local business owner. He had included his business card and contact information, making everything feel real and legitimate. Sarah sat quietly, processing what this meant. Amy watched her mother's face. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak for a moment. This was enough to cover Rose's medical bills. Enough for rent and new school supplies for Amy. Enough to breathe. The phone number on the business card was local. With shaking fingers, Sarah dialed. A secretary answered, connecting her to Michael. His voice was kind, professional. He explained that the check was genuine, and he would be honored if she accepted it. Sarah told him she would love to come. "How long are you going to miss me?" "Your kindness to my father showed me something rare," Michael said. "In a world where people rush past each other, you stop to help. Dad remembers you, calls you his umbrella angel. The nurses say he hasn't been this happy in months. Sarah found her voice. I don't know what to say. This is so much money. It's not just about money, Michael replied. Dad needs part-time care, someone kind and patient. If you're interested, we're looking for a companion for him, 3 afternoons a week. The pay is good, and the hours would work around your diner schedule. Sarah thought about George's gentle smile, how he had reminded her of her own father. This wasn't charity. This was an opportunity, born from a simple act of kindness. The next morning, Sarah walked Amy to school. They stopped at the store, buying new pencils and notebooks. At the diner, she served coffee with a lighter heart. During her break, she called the electric company, arranging to pay the bill in full. That afternoon, she visited George at his home. He remembered her, smiling at the blue umbrella still sitting by his chair. They talked about old movies and he showed her pictures from his younger days. The nurse showed Sarah his medication schedule, his favorite foods, his daily routine. Rose's face lit up when Sarah told her about the job. See, her mother said. Good things happen to good people. Sarah hugged her, thankful she could now afford the medical tests Rose needed. That evening, as rain fell outside, Sarah helped Amy with homework at their kitchen table. The bills were paid, there was food in the fridge, and by the door hung a new umbrella, bright blue like the old one. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness open unexpected doors. Sarah had given an umbrella to a stranger, never expecting anything in return. What she received wasn't just financial security, but a reminder that compassion creates ripples we can't foresee. Loved this story? Tap that like button and subscribe to Mystic Tales for more. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments.